If my people, Bible reading part 161, we are now in the book of Zechariah, following the timeline of the scrolls that they wrote and when they were read by others, and when they were published. Um, we had just finished Haggai, and the importance here is that Haggai was kind of like us. What's going on today? What's going on tomorrow? Earthly things. This temple does this. The stone must be put there. He's talking about what we talk on a daily basis. Now, at the same time, and Haggai was a prophet from the Father. No doubt about that. And he attributes all his conversations from this is what Yahweh says. But he did it on earthly terms, just like normal, everyday speech. And these two may have well known each other. Don't know for a fact, but it's not that big land over there. So Zechariah, he speaks out of his head, and he doesn't speak like, "What am I going to do tomorrow?" Do I go to Dairy Queen get ice cream? No, his head is up there, all over the place. So we'll kind of show you how that goes. We start off with about the same time of Darius, second year of Darius. The word of Yahweh came to this time Zechariah, and look how the word is totally different than the word that Haggai gets. Although they say the same things, they support each other, their behavior and style. What does that apply to today? So, what's that mean? Why do I have to know this? Because everyone has a gift. As I said before on a number of occasions, and I need to mention it over and over again, don't argue amongst yourselves so much. Don't argue about the little bitty tiny matters that don't mean a hill of beans anyway. Only argue about the important things of the Father. Uh, because if Zechariah and Haggai are on the same path, and whether they met each other or not doesn't make a difference. They're both from getting information from the Father. And if they're on a big long walk through life, and Haggai's in the 12-mile mark, and Zechariah is in the 600-mile walk, and it's 1,000 miles long, neither one can see the final outcome. It's too far away. Both of them can't see it. Although Zechariah is way ahead of the game. Understand? But if Zechariah turns around and looks for Haggai, and they're on the same narrow path of the Father, of eternal life, of hearing and obeying the word, they still can't see each other. So they're not communicating, but they're on the same path. So don't argue. So, Zechariah may have been there already. Haggai has not been as far as Zechariah, so he doesn't understand what Zechariah sees. And he shouldn't say, well, I don't know if that's true at all because that's not what I read in my Bible. Well, that's because, Haggai, you're not there yet. See how that goes? And we should be the same way. So, Zechariah, what do we got to say about that? Well, Zechariah said right at the beginning, prophet Zechariah, son of Berakah. Berakah. Well, Zechariah, what's Zechariah mean? Yahweh has remembered. And um, and then there's Bekiah, which means Yahweh blesses. Yahweh blesses. And then um, his he was the son of Iddo or Iddo, Iddo, which means in Hebrew. That's why Hebrew and words mean things and all that stuff. That's why it means appointed time. So if we read it backwards, because Iddo came first, so we read it backwards, typical Hebrew, right to left, appointed time, Yahweh will bless, and he will remember. Now, people in those days paid attention to these prophets because of what I just told you. They understood it that way. They didn't say, oh, over there's Edo and what's his face, Zechariah. Let's just call him Zach or something, or Zach. No, it means when they look at these and hear these men's name, they say, oh, here comes the guy with the appointed time who blesses and he remembers. Wow. Makes you think a little differently when you read things, doesn't it? So, what does um, what does the book of Zechariah do? It's another prophetic book, um, and he has some incredible visions. He has 10 of them. So there's an introduction and a warning right from the very beginning. You need to hear and obey. Number one, the riders under the myrtle trees. A lot of people have said, "Oh, Bruce, they've heard these stories and they've asked this question. Well, we've heard this before and we've heard that before, but that's from those extra biblical books, and I didn't think you read those books, Bruce. Why are you reading them to us now? Did you get it from the books that weren't printed in the Bible? Those extra biblicals, the apocrypha stuff? Yeah, that's where you shouldn't be mentioning this in your If My People Bible reading." And I need to tell them, whoa, 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 slow down a little bit. The stories about the four horns, the stories about the four smiths, the story about the man in the measuring line, measuring out Jerusalem. He's gonna measure it out. In other words, it's gonna become bigger, bigger. Now we go back to Ezekiel, so it's right out of the book of Ezekiel. But those stories you're reading is not coming from extra biblical stuff. It's coming from Zechariah. So no, you're not hearing those stories from stuff that's not holy. It is. It's right here. The story about Joshua and Satan. How many times in any institutionalized church have you heard the story of Joshua? Now, there's been a number of Joshuas, by the way, but this particular Joshua and Satan, chapters 3, 1 through 7. The answer is none. None. Don't you think this stuff is important and should be brought up in the pulpit, and if not the pulpit, in Sunday school, and if not Sunday school, and those little small groups that people form in churches these days and sit at home on Tuesdays and Wednesdays or so forth? Shouldn't it? Shouldn't it? How come it's not? The story about the branch, chapter 3, 8 through 10. The lampstand and the two olive trees. Now that's brought up again in Revelation. You need to know this before you get to Revelation. You need to be taught that. You need to read that. And you need to tell others about that. How about the flying roll? the big roll. Not the flying carpet. Not Alibaba and the seven thieves. How about the woman in the ephah? Woman in the basket. Little ephah. This basket. And what that represents. If you haven't read this and haven't understood the book of Zechariah, how are you possibly going to understand the book of Revelation? And for those who teach Revelation classes, I've been to dozens of them, and online throughout the last 40, 50 years, never heard any of this ever. And those who do the Revelation class, to reference it to the Old Covenant, because usually the Old Covenant backs up the New Covenant. The New Covenant backs up the Old Covenant. Yeah, it's not in there. And when you pick up any Bible in the bookstore that has commentary or any of the sidelines, back references, concordances, do you see this referencing back to Revelation? Few, I would say few. The revelation or the revealing of the vision of the four chariots. That's in chapter 6. So chapter 7 and 8 is kind of like historic information. When you get into that, it has to do with when the heart is right, the ritual is right. Ritual is a behavioral way to do things and act. It isn't something evil. Okay, don't get caught up in that. When the heart is right, the ritual is always right. Always, without fail. When the heart is wrong, the ritual is going to be wrong. People will add and subtract. Add and subtract. That's the big warning that is given at the end of the Word. The Bible. The big warning's in there. Don't add and subtract from the Word. In other words, make sure your heart is right, and whatever you do, your ritual will be correct. For instance, I'll give you one that will probably upset a lot of people. Every document that's ever been put together in the last 400 or 500 years, people may get together and do a ritual before they talk to Yeshua and talk with the Father. on Shabbats. And they will kneel down and light candles. Now listen to what I'm saying. It's out there, and I can tell you, I can save you hundreds of hours of research. But the saying a certain thing, always the same thing. Yeshua made an example of that. He says, when you pray, pray to the Father like this, not exactly what I just said, but the churches, what have they done? They picked it up and say the same thing. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, That's a wonderful thing that Yeshua said, but he's not wanting you to repeat it word for word, and that's all you ever come up with. Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. That's a good thing for parents to teach you, but it's not what you get older to and you keep continually saying it. And the women would get down and say a certain thing, and the men were not allowed. The women took over. In other words, that was an important thing in the pagan religions out there, the pagan religions. And they would push the smoke into their hair and face. I've seen so many people do that. And I don't say a thing. Because when I have said it, and a few times I have, boy, have I upset the apple carts. Now, just like I told people one time, we are slaves to Father. We are the slaves to Yahweh. And I thought one lady was going to throw me out of her house. This was a Missouri small group that we were with for a long time. And after I said, she said, how dare you say that? How dare you say that? And a year and a half later, I get an email from her saying she's actually said, I was sorry, I was wrong, but we've never talked to him since. Well, that's been 15, 20 years. Because I said something that was an absolute fact that I spent years of research on. I made a comment in front of a lady that lived and thought she was free to do anything she wanted to because she was a woman. Hear me roar. This is the age we live in. You can't say anything because you're sexist. And she thought it was a sexist statement that we are slaves to Yahweh. Holy smokes. Holy kadosh. I laughed today, but we lost some good friends. And by the way, they opened up a bookstore at Lake of the Ozarks. So they're doing okay. Can't talk to them anymore, but that's okay. Yahweh's purpose concerning Jerusalem is unchanged by any ritual. What Yahweh's going to do is Yahweh's going to do. And nothing on this earth and man is going to change it. And he lets you know he's coming back. But when you read the book of Zechariah, he makes it very clear again. If you pay attention to the book of Ezekiel, he's coming back, and from the area of the north again in his area where he will dwell. He will dwell. And then it says, and in the Bibles, and he will also have control over Jerusalem. So he's not coming up to set up his oblation and sanctuary area in Jerusalem or anywhere in it. It is north. It's there, folks. Read it. Read it. And then the importance of Jerusalem is that's where the people of the world will come. They will not be coming on the oblation sanctuary area of Israel that is set apart for the Father and the Son and the Prince. It's not going to be. They will go to Jerusalem, where the healing waters will come down from the mountain of the Father to Jerusalem. And then by the time it gets there, the waters are deep, deep. Then the last part in chapters 9 through 14 has to do with burdens and prophetic aspects connected with the first coming into Yeshua, chapters 9 through 11. And the second burden is the second coming of Yeshua, chapters 9, 11. So there's the layout in the Old Covenant of the first and second coming. Wow, there it is. It's not just Malachi and other statements in Isaiah. So this book, Zechariah, very important. All right, hope you enjoy this, and we all on this end bless you.